Idea. Today we'll start the chapter 8, how do organisms reproduce in biology. Okay, so in the book itself they start with the question, is reproduction is necessary to stay alive? Okay, is that necessary to stay alive? Is it a necessary life process which the individual has to live? It is necessary? No. Is it a if there is no respiration, he will not live. There is no digestion, he will not be alive, right? So these are the necessary life process to make the individual alive, organism to live, right? But is the reproduction is necessary to stay alive? No. This reproduction, it is not necessary to stay alive. Okay, it is not required. Okay, but then why do organisms reproduce? Okay, why do they because you know that if you want to give birth to a baby, you would have seen your sister or auntie has given birth to a baby, right? So she has to put so many efforts and suffered a lot for the 9 months period. He's carrying the offspring in the womb, right? So they suffered a lot. Why do they do so? Why? But it is not necessary for them to stay alive, right? But still, why they do all this thing? Okay, so to increase their population, to maintain the stability in the earth, usually to increase their population. That means one of the species, that the human being is, it is a species to increase our population. Okay, if we are not reproducing, if the population is not increasing, then day by day the population, for example, the population this much will reduce to this, and so reduce this to this, and one day it will be extinct. Nobody will be there, right? People will get older, some of them will die, right? Some of them, it will not be it will not be stable for a long time. It will keep on reducing. Okay, to maintain the stability, to maintain this population, we need to reproduce. Okay, to maintain our population in the earth, we need to reproduce. Okay, to increase the population, we need to reproduce to maintain our stability in the earth. Okay, next, and also for necessary, it is, this reproduction is necessary for evolution of the organism. The first day itself a human being has born? No. He is you know, this evolution, from the monkey only we have come, right? People used to say like that, right? So but evolution, this reproduction is necessary for the evolution of the organism, forming the new species. Okay, so for that purpose only reproduction is necessary. Okay, so what does this actually mean, that reproduction? It is a process by which an organism produces young ones of its own kind, for perpetuation of its race. Okay, to continue its existence in the earth, they have to reproduce of their own kind. Okay, next, what is the basic work involved in this reproduction? What is their actual work? That means it involves in replicating or making copies of the blueprint of our body design. They said they produce young ones of its own kind. The human being will give birth to a human being only. A monkey will give birth to monkey baby, right? A cat will give birth to cat baby, right? So they have to make their own copies. That is the work they are doing. Okay, it involves in replicating or making copies of the blueprint of our body design. I cannot give birth to a cat, right? I can give birth to a human being only, right? So a blueprint of our body design, that is the main work involved in this reproduction. Okay, so I mentioned here, it is a blueprint of our body. That is some blueprint means or the exact design, right? Information, how our body is designed. Okay, all this information stored in which part of our body? Where does our body design store or present? Okay, the chromosomes we have studied all this thing in 9th standard. The chromosomes in the nucleus of a cell contain information for inheritance of features from. that is transmission of features from parents to the next generation, right? The chromosomes in the nucleus of the cell contain information, okay? In which form? In the form of DNA molecule, in the form of a DNA molecule, okay? You know that the basic unit basic unit of the organism is a cell. From each cell only we have produced, right? A full body is formed, right? How does the cell the protein is the basics for the protein helps in the body building, right? So this DNA molecule is used in the synthesis of protein, that particular protein, okay? That molecule only contains other information, right, of our body design, okay? So what is the DNA? DNA is nothing but your deoxyribonucleic acid. It is a molecule, okay? That full form of DNA is deoxyribonucleic acid. Okay, the DNA in the cell nucleus act as the information source in making of protein, okay? This particular protein, that is the design stored in that chromosomes, are produced, synthesized by this DNA only, okay? It contains that, okay? The DNA in the cell nucleus act as the information source in making of proteins. If the information is changed, if the information given by that is changed, different protein will be made, right? Different protein will be made means then the cell structure will differ. Then you will give birth to a different design baby, right? So if the information is changed, the different protein will be made. Think that for example, this process as a recipe. You are going to cook something, you are taken some recipe. If you change the recipe, you will not get the final food what you expected, right? It will differ. So without changing, you have to use that recipe at correct amount, right? Then only you will get the exact recipe. What you expected will come, right? If you put more or less of any some ingredients, then you will not get the same thing, right? So if the information is changed, the different protein will be made, and this different protein will eventually lead to altered body design. Clear on this? Okay. Next, what is the basic event of the reproduction? Just now we are seeing the basic event in the reproduction, the creation of the DNA copies. That is only our blueprint of a body design is stored in this DNA only, right? So it has to be copied, that is to be replicated. What we have seen, what is reproduction in general? What is the work of the reproduction? It is just replicating or making copies of blueprint of a body design, right? The body design are stored in the which part of this cell? The nucleus, in the DNA, right? So its main work is to copy the DNA, right? So that it is a basic event of reproduction. The basic event of reproduction is the creation of DNA copy. Okay, how it copies the DNA. Okay, how does cell build copies of their DNA? Cells use chemical reaction to build copies of their DNA. Okay, so it uses a protein is a chemical, right? So it uses some chemical reaction to build copies of their DNA. How does it involve? So it's going to make a copy means exactly it's going to produce another cell, another DNA of the same kind, right? Thus 2 copies of the DNA are produced in a reproducing cell, and only the 2 DNA copies will be produced now. It has once it is produced now, that has to be separated from each other, right? So so this is the cell nucleus, and it contains the DNA. Okay, it's going to produce another DNA copy of the same thing. Okay, using the chemical reaction, it produces this DNA need a same cellular apparatus with mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, cytoplasm. Everything is required, right? So next to the once the DNA is copied, then it is followed by forming the another cellular apparatus. Then this DNA will be shifted to this cell. So this one cell become 2. and these two cell, this one cell will gives rise to another two cells, and this cell will give rise to another two cells, and this cell will give rise to another two cells. Likewise it will divide. Okay, so the copies of the DNA are produced in a reproducing cell, and they need to be separated for each other. Okay, for this DNA to exist, it need a separate cellular apparatus. Okay, so the DNA copying is accompanied by the creation of an additional cellular apparatus, this additional cell. Okay, only the DNA is copied. Likewise, the additional cell apparatus. So everything will be copied. Mitochondria, Golgi apparatus, cytoplasm, everything. So new cellular apparatus will be created, and then the DNA copies separate each other with their own cellular apparatus. So afterwards it will separate and they will exist in their own cellular apparatus. Effectively, a cell divides to give rise to a two cell. Okay, this cell divides to give rise to a two cells. Clear on this? Okay. Okay, so we produce two cells. Okay, does these two cells are absolutely identical? We have one cell, now it divides into two, right? Does these two cells are identical in nature? It looks similar. For example, it will be like this, means it looks similar to the parent cell, right? But are they identical, exactly same? No. See, because it involves some chemical reaction. Always the chemical reaction is 100% correct. Okay, since the cell use biochemical reaction to produce new cells, there may be some errors. I have given one example of recipe, right? Cooking. We may increase one amount of the ingredient, or we may decrease the amount of some ingredients, so that the recipe is not exactly what you are expected. You will not get that, right? Some error may occur. Okay, human error is natural, right? Likewise, in the biochemical reaction also there may be some errors. Okay, so no biochemical reactions are absolutely reliable. Okay, 100% it is not reliable. Okay, therefore it is only to be expected that process of copying DNA will have some variation each time. Every time it is producing new cells, right? Every time there may be some variation. Every time it has some variation. Okay, hence DNA copies generated will be similar. It may be similar but may not be identical to the original. Okay, so what is I have the introduction part. How does DNA copies cell produce? I have given as a question and answer. Okay, I have given everything as a simple question and answer, so that you can able to answer. Okay, hence DNA copies generated will be similar but may not be identical to the original. These are all the questions asked in the book itself, in the paragraph. Does these cells are absolutely identical? No, it may not be identical, but it may be similar. Why? Because the biochemical reactions are not absolutely reliable. There may be some errors. Okay, errors in copying the DNA. So some variations will exist each time. Okay, clear? Next, so what will be the consequence of this variation? Some variations have occurred. Okay, what will be the results of this variation? That is your question. What are the consequences of this variation? Some of the variations may be so drastic that the new DNA copy cannot work with the cellular apparatus it inherits. Because it's created a new cellular apparatus and it is separated, right? So it may not be work with that. Okay, such a newborn cell will die. It may die. Okay, because of the variation it may not exist. Okay, it may die. Okay, some of the variation may not be so drastic. Some of them will not be so drastic, but this inbuilt tendency, but some variations were there, right? That inbuilt tendency for variation during reproduction is the basis for evolution of the new species, formation of the new species. Okay, so because every time it is varying, and finally you will get a exactly new species apart from this from the original one. See, so this is your parent cell. It divides into two, and again this divides into two. Every time the variation will occur, and finally you may get a different species. That is your evolution. Okay, evolution of a formation of a new species. Okay, these are the consequence of this variation. Okay, we'll see importance of variation in next class. Thank you.